Most people think they're afraid. Unknown. Most people think they're afraid of failure. They're wrong. They're afraid of exposure. Failure can be blamed on bad timing, on circumstances, on other people, but exposure removes excuses. It forces you to face something much more uncomfortable, who you actually are without the stories. Stoicism begins exactly there, not with calm, not with balance, but with the moment you realize you've been avoiding responsibility for your own inner life. Because here's the truth most people never say out loud. You can survive pain, you can survive loss, you can survive rejection. What terrifies people is seeing themselves clearly and realizing how much was wasted. Time, energy, potential. That realization hits harder than any external setback. Stoicism doesn't protect you from that pain. It guides you through it. The Stoics believe something radical, that your biggest enemy is not chaos. It's unconscious living, drifting, reacting, letting habits decide for you, day after day, until years pass and you don't recognize the person you became. That's why Stoicism doesn't start with motivation. Motivation fades. It starts with awareness. Awareness of how often you avoid discomfort by choosing the familiar. Familiar problems, familiar excuses, familiar distractions. They hurt, but they feel safe. The Stoic notices this pattern and breaks it deliberately. Not aggressively, not dramatically. Precisely, because precision beats intensity. The first thing Stoicism teaches you to confront is the illusion of identity. You think you are your habits, your moods, your past decisions. You're not. Those are patterns. And patterns can be changed once they're seen clearly. That's why Stoicism is uncomfortable. It removes the comfort of ignorance. You can no longer say, "I didn't know." You know, and knowing creates obligation. The Stoics understood something crucial. Clarity is a burden before it becomes freedom. Once you see what needs to change, you can't unsee it. You can ignore it, but the cost increases. That's where most people break. They feel the discomfort of awareness and immediately run back to distraction, noise, entertainment, endless stimulation, anything to avoid sitting alone with their own thoughts. The Stoic does the opposite. He sits, not to feel good, but to see accurately, because accuracy changes behavior. When you see clearly how you waste time, time becomes heavier. When you see clearly how you lie to yourself, words lose their power. And when you see clearly how fragile your discipline is, you stop trusting mood and start building structure. This is where Stoicism becomes practical, not philosophical. The Stoic doesn't wait to feel aligned. He acts his way into alignment. He chooses actions that reinforce identity, even when it's boring, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when no one is watching. Because character isn't built in moments of pressure. It's built in moments of choice that seem insignificant. What you do when no one reacts. What you choose when there's no reward. What you tolerate when it slowly drains you. Those moments accumulate. And one day, you wake up either proud or resentful. Stoicism exists to prevent regret before it becomes permanent. And this leads to the most dangerous question you can ask yourself. If nothing changes, who will I be in 5 years? Most people feel that question and immediately distract themselves. The Stoic stays with it because avoidance doesn't stop time. It just makes it crueler later. And this is only the beginning, because once you stop avoiding yourself, you're forced to confront something even harder, your relationship with power. And that's where this goes next. Power. Not the loud kind, not control over others. Internal power. The kind that decides whether you act or hesitate. Most people think power comes from confidence, from certainty, from knowing exactly what to do. Stoicism disagrees. It says real power comes from non-dependence. The moment you need something to feel steady, you've given power away. Approval, results, recognition, comfort. The Stoic audits these dependencies mercilessly, because dependency creates fear, and fear dictates behavior. You hesitate to speak. You avoid conflict. You delay action. Not because it's wrong, but because it threatens something you cling to. The Stoic wants none of that. He understands something brutal. If you want freedom, you must first identify what controls you. And most people already know. They just don't want to admit it. It's the fear of being disliked, the fear of being seen as inadequate, the fear of making a choice that can't be undone. So they stay in limbo, thinking, planning, consuming advice, but never committing. Stoicism treats indecision as a silent enemy. Not dramatic, not obvious, but corrosive. Because every day spent undecided is a day your life moves forward without your direction. The Stoic would rather choose imperfectly than remain passive, because passivity has momentum. It drags you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't fail because they choose the wrong path. They fail because they refuse to choose at all. Stoicism pushes you out of that paralysis, not by promising success, but by redefining success. Success is no longer outcome, it's alignment. Did you act according to your values? Did you do what was within your control? Did you avoid betraying yourself? If yes, the day was a success, even if nothing worked. That redefinition changes everything. Failure loses its threat. Mistakes lose their shame. Action becomes lighter because the cost of trying drops dramatically. And this is where courage appears. Not cinematic courage, quiet courage. The courage to act without reassurance, to move without applause, to stand by a decision even when doubt is loud. Stoicism doesn't silence doubt. It ignores it. Doubt is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're stepping beyond habit. The Stoic expects doubt, just like he expects fatigue and resistance and discomfort. None of those dictate action. They accompany it. This is why Stoicism produces people who seem calm under pressure. They're not calm because they're confident. They're calm because they trained without needing certainty. They learned to move anyway. Now let's talk about control again, because this is where most people misunderstand it. The Stoic doesn't try to control life. He controls response speed. Most damage happens in the first few seconds after something goes wrong. The reaction, the words, the impulse, the Stoic inserts space there, not to suppress, to choose. That space is trained daily, in small moments, when something annoys you and you don't comment, when something provokes you and you pause, when something tempts you and you wait. Each pause strengthens authority, internal authority, and internal authority compounds. Over time, you stop feeling dragged by your emotions. You feel positioned, grounded, capable of waiting. That ability alone puts you ahead of most people, because most people can't wait. They react, they consume, they speak, and then regret follows. Stoicism breaks that cycle, but here's the cost. You will feel out of sync with the world, less reactive, less dramatic, less emotionally visible. Some people will misinterpret that. They'll call you cold, detached, arrogant. The Stoic accepts this price because being understood is less important than being aligned. And alignment creates something rare. Consistency. Not mood-based consistency, character-based consistency. You become someone others can rely on, and more importantly, someone you can rely on. That's real power, not dominance, not control, self-command. And once you taste that, the next realization hits hard, because power without direction is dangerous, and direction requires a deeper discipline. One most people avoid: purpose. And that's where we're going next. Purpose. Not the inspirational kind, not slogans, not something you find. Stoicism treats purpose as something you commit to, not something that magically appears. Most people wait for clarity before they act. Stoicism flips that. Clarity comes after commitment. You don't discover purpose by thinking. You discover it by choosing a direction and bearing its weight. This is where most people collapse, because commitment removes options, and options feel like freedom until they rot into hesitation. Stoicism teaches you to narrow your life, not to make it smaller, to make it sharper. A scattered mind feels busy, a focused mind feels heavy. That heaviness is responsibility, and responsibility terrifies people because it removes the ability to blame circumstances. Once you commit, everything that follows is yours. The effort, the sacrifice, the outcome. Stoicism says, good. That ownership is strength. The Stoics didn't ask, what do I want to be? They asked, what is required of me? That question shifts the center of gravity. Desire becomes secondary. Duty becomes primary. Not duty to society, not duty to image, duty to your own standards. And standards are what remain when motivation disappears. This is why Stoicism doesn't rely on passion. Passion fades, it fluctuates, it lies. Discipline doesn't. The Stoic builds systems that don't care how he feels. Routines, practices, non-negotiables, not extreme, consistent. And consistency builds identity. You don't feel disciplined. You act disciplined until it becomes normal. Most people wait for identity to change before behavior changes. Stoicism reverses it. Behavior first, identity follows. That's uncomfortable because it removes emotional permission. You don't wait until you feel ready. You act because it's required, and readiness grows behind you. This is where purpose stops being abstract. Purpose becomes visible in how you spend your mornings, in how you handle boredom, in how you respond to resistance. Purpose isn't found in grand visions. It's revealed in what you're willing to do repeatedly without praise. Now let's talk about meaning, because meaning is not happiness. Meaning is weight. A meaningful life feels demanding. It pulls on you. It requires sacrifice. That's why people avoid it while claiming they want it. They want meaning's reward without its cost. Stoicism offers no such shortcut. It tells you plainly, if your life feels empty, it's not because you lack opportunity. It's because you avoid responsibility. Responsibility fills emptiness. Not immediately. Gradually, as you carry it, you develop a relationship with yourself. You trust yourself more. You respect yourself more. And respect creates stability. Now here's the paradox. The more responsibility you accept, the freer you feel. Because freedom is not absence of constraint. It's choosing your constraints consciously. Most people live constrained by fear, habit, and avoidance. The Stoic chooses discipline instead, and discipline, unlike fear, serves you. This is why Stoics don't chase balance. Balance implies negotiation. They choose direction. Some days are heavy, some days are light. The direction doesn't change. This steadiness creates momentum, and momentum does something powerful. It silences doubt. Not because doubt disappears, but because action drowns it out. You don't argue with your mind all day. You move, and movement clarifies. Now ask yourself this honestly. If someone watched how you spend your time, would they be able to tell what matters to you? Or would it look accidental? Stoicism forces that alignment. Your time must match your values, or your values are fiction. That realization hurts, but it also liberates. Because once you see misalignment clearly, you can correct it. No drama, no reinvention, just adjustment. This is why Stoicism scales over time. It doesn't demand perfection, it demands correction. Daily. And that leads to the final discipline, the one that determines whether all of this holds or collapses under pressure. Because pressure is inevitable, and how you meet it defines everything. That's where this ends next. Pressure. Not imagined pressure, not future pressure, real pressure, the kind that shows up uninvited and exposes who you actually are. Stoicism is built for this moment because pressure doesn't create character, it reveals it. Most people discover too late that their discipline only existed when things were easy. They were calm when nothing challenged them, focused when nothing demanded sacrifice, principled when nothing was at risk. Pressure strips that illusion away. Deadlines, loss, conflict, fatigue. Suddenly, philosophy becomes useless if it hasn't been practiced. The Stoics knew this. That's why they trained under small pressures daily. They didn't wait for crises. They practiced restraint when it didn't matter, so that when it did, their response was automatic. Pressure compresses time. You don't get to think deeply. You don't get to consult advice. You act, and your action comes from habit. This is why Stoicism emphasizes repetition, not inspiration. Repetition creates default behavior. Under pressure, you don't rise to ideals, you fall to training. Most people are trained by impulse. Scroll, react, avoid. The Stoic trains differently. Pause, assess, act. That pause is not natural. It's built. And it changes everything. Because most mistakes happen in the first emotional second. the sharp word, the defensive reaction, the impulsive decision. The Stoic slows that moment down, not externally, internally. He creates just enough space to choose response over reaction. That space feels small, but it's where freedom lives. Now let's talk about endurance, not physical endurance, mental endurance. The ability to keep standards when you're tired, when no one notices, when progress feels invisible. This is where most people quit. Not loudly, quietly. They stop trying as hard. They compromise just a little. They justify small lapses. Those lapses accumulate. Stoicism treats this as dangerous, not because perfection matters, but because erosion is subtle. You don't notice yourself becoming weaker until resistance feels unbearable. The Stoic prevents this by anchoring to non-negotiables. Not many, a few, actions that happen regardless of mood, regardless of outcome. These are not extreme rules, they're stabilizers. They keep identity intact under stress. When pressure hits, you don't ask who you are. You already know. This is why Stoics don't panic easily. Not because they don't care, because they've rehearsed difficulty, they've imagined loss, they've accepted uncertainty, they've prepared mentally for things going wrong. So when they do, there's no shock, only response. This doesn't mean Stoics don't feel pain. They do, but pain doesn't turn into chaos. It becomes information. What failed? What needs adjusting? What is still within my control? Those questions cut through noise. While others spiral emotionally, the Stoic moves operationally. That's not coldness. That's survival. Now here's something uncomfortable. Pressure exposes attachment. What you fear losing controls your behavior under stress. Status, comfort, approval, identity. The Stoic studies this closely because pressure reveals dependencies you didn't know you had. And once revealed, they must be addressed, not by force, by detachment. Detachment doesn't mean indifference. It means flexibility. You can lose things without losing yourself. That's the goal. Because the only thing that must remain intact is character. Everything else is negotiable. The Stoics believe this deeply, that you can lose position, possessions, even reputation, and still win if you act correctly. That belief changes how you face pressure. You're less desperate, less frantic, less reactive. You don't cling, and not clinging is power. Now here's the turning point. Once you stop fearing pressure, you stop avoiding responsibility. You stop choosing easy paths to preserve comfort. You start choosing difficult paths that build strength, not recklessly, deliberately. This is where Stoicism becomes visible to others. You don't talk about it. You show it by how you handle adversity, by how you speak when challenged, by how you act when tired, by how you hold standards when compromise is tempting. People notice that, even if they don't understand it. And that brings us to the final realization, the one Stoicism quietly leads you toward. Because all of this discipline, all this restraint, all this internal work is not about control. It's about something rarer, peace. Not comfort-based peace, not conditional peace, the kind that remains when conditions collapse. And that's where this ends. If this video helped you, please subscribe to the channel Stoic Freedom.